Good morning. I'm Michael Gingerich, and I am one of the co-founders of the nonprofit Someone to Tell It To, which is based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I'm here this morning at Derry Presbyterian Church in Hershey, Pennsylvania, to speak to a class, and I feel privileged and honored to be invited here today. I'm going to tell more about the work that we do, but a lot of that is going to be through stories. So I'm going to start with a story this morning and go from there. The story takes place here in Hershey. There was a woman who reached out to my nonprofit co-founder and I. She needed someone to listen to her, someone to tell it to. She asked, could we come to her home? And we did. We continued meeting with her for months and months, and actually several years. She had a lot of social anxiety, had a hard time going out of the house, also had a significant number of medical issues. And she gave us a list, literally written a list of all the things that she was being treated for. A lot of all physical and some emotional and mental. One day, I don't know, something came up about Hershey Gardens, which is a beautiful place here in town that gets a lot of tourist attention. And we said, well, how many times have you been to those gardens? And she said, never. I've never been there. Now, she was a 65-year-old woman, lived in this area, in this town, her whole life, and had never been to the Hershey Gardens. So we decided in our next meeting, we would take her to the Hershey Gardens if she was willing to go. She said she was. But on the day that we arrived at her house to pick her up, to take her, and literally, if she was in the kind of physical condition and without the disabilities that she had, she could have walked there. She lived that closely. She confessed to us that she nearly canceled because she got scared because of the social anxiety that she has. But she went. It's a hot day, a hot summer day, and we got there, and this woman, 65-year-old woman, turned into, and I'm meaning this in the best possible way, into a little child. Her delight at seeing the flowers. Her delight at going into the butterfly house and seeing the beautiful butterflies that would come and land on you. And her concern that she didn't want to step on one or didn't want to, anything like that. And every single color, different color of rose in this rose garden that she saw, she bent down to smell it. And was just like a child. And we went through the various different kinds of gardens that were there, and every one was just a marvel to her, and she just couldn't believe that she was there. She got tired, and so after going through much of the gardens, and we sat down on a bench, the three of us, and we talked about what she was feeling and what she liked about it, and how it was brightening her day, we hoped. And then we asked her, why is it that you've never been there? That was her response. I never thought that I was worth it. She never thought that she was good enough to go to a place so beautiful, a place so iconic in this town and in this region, that she didn't deserve to be there. And then we asked her, have you ever been to the Hotel Hershey, which is right next door? Another iconic, very nice place. You can expect her answer, no. Lived here her whole life. She had never been to the Hotel Hershey. So we said, well, guess where we're going now? So we went, and we took her there. and took her inside so she could see, its beauty. And then we sat at a table outside and we ordered something to eat and to drink for her. Said, we will pay for this for you. You deserve to be here. The other part of this story is, one of the things that she had confessed to us was that she would go to bed every night praying to God that she wouldn't wake up. She was that lonely, that sad, that had such low self-esteem and self-worth that she didn't believe that she necessarily deserved to live. And she confessed that she also, with all the medication that she took every day, sometimes took more than was prescribed for the day, hoping to help God along. If you understand what I mean. And that's also why we continued meeting with her. She was also seeing a psychiatrist, but she also needed the kind of help that we gave that was more back and forth and less clinical, more relational. And many months went by, and on another visit, one day she proudly said, I want you to know that I don't pray what I used to pray anymore. She wasn't even sure she believed in God, but just in case. She said, I don't pray to die anymore. Because you've come to see me, and you've kept coming to see me and listen to me. You've been there to support me, and you've continued to tell me that I do deserve it. I deserve all the good things that this life can bring. I deserve to go anywhere, be anywhere, and do things that bring me joy. There is no greater, satisfaction than that. To know that when you listen to someone, support someone, don't give up on someone, don't judge someone, don't tell someone what to do, but simply respect them and honor them wherever they are, whomever they are, whatever they're going through, whatever they're feeling and dealing with, and simply, though it's not always so simple, but simply show up and care for them and show that they are deserving of love. It changes lives. And that's what our organization, Someone to Tell It To, does every single day. That was back in the days when it was just the two of us, my partner in this ministry and I, doing this work. But now we have teams of listeners who go out and they listen and they support. And we continue to get more and more letters and emails and text messages and people telling us that by showing up, by listening non-judgmentally, by listening deeply, by being empathetic and validating their problems and their fears and their troubles and their anxieties, and also celebrating their joys when they have them, that their lives are changed for the better. And that's the work that we do. We try to help people feel less lonely, less afraid, less just negative about who they are, and help them to form better relationships, first with themselves, and then with the other people in their lives, so they're not so lonely and disconnected and isolated anymore. And the stories that I will tell today, that people have given permission. We've written about this story. She gave us permission to share this story, because invariably, each one of the stories that we tell, the people in them want others to benefit from their experience. They want others to know that the others are not alone in theirs. And that, as one woman told us one time, in hearing other people's stories, she realized that she wasn't such an oddball. So it's a quote, after all. None of us want to be an oddball. We all want to know that so much of what we go through is just simply human. And many more people go through things like we do, the challenges we may have, the disappointments we may live with, the regrets than we imagine. And that our difficult situations we're not in them alone, that others are in them too. And that when we can discover that and share that with one another and know that we're not so alone, life can begin to get so much better. Someone to Tell It To was created on January 1st, 2012. We just celebrated our 13th anniversary, just a few, less than 2 weeks ago. Over that time, we have listened to more than 25,000 people, 25,000 interactions across the United States, much of it virtually, as well as in about 25 countries around the world, where we have had interactions with people usually using social media, using email, using the phone, using Skype, using WhatsApp, any technological thing that we can, we try to meet people where they are. We've listened to people as far away as New Zealand and Australia. We have listened to people currently, especially in Ukraine, those who are experiencing the horrors of the war there. We listen to people here locally in central Pennsylvania, certainly, and mostly face to face, and of course that's wonderful. We've also done some traveling to meet people in a variety of places. Earlier this fall, right after the terrible hurricane devastated North Carolina, we were in North Carolina doing something we had planned to do, some training work in listening, and to a county government there outside Charlotte. And that county was not super affected by the hurricane, but they were called to go help. County employees were called to go help the other counties that were. And then we got to listen. We didn't expect to do this, but got to listen to people in the county who were struggling and feeling overwhelmed, not just about the extra work they were having to do because of the hurricane, but just in their lives, their work lives and in their personal lives. And I feel so privileged to do that kind of work, to be able to help people, to listen to them, support them, and let them know that they are not alone in their struggles. We have we train people in listening. We train more than 1,500 people to do that work. We have, my partner and I have written 4 books together on listening, some of them telling the stories of listening, others, sharing the principles that we have learned and believed and studied and had experience with on how to listen better to one another. And we also have a podcast. We've had now 101 episodes that we have produced, and it's one of my favorite things to do that podcast. And we've listened to people here locally. People we've listened to have agreed to come and talk and share. We've listened to various experts on listening around the country and across the world, and we've had some people who have some fame have been on the podcast. One of which was Timothy Shriver, who is the chair of the International Special Olympics and part of the Kennedy family. That we talked with him. And that was a really special one for me. I have a son who has severe intellectual disabilities and autism, and Mr. Shriver did his homework and knew that, and asked me questions about my son, called him by name, his name is Matthew, and was very empathetic about what it is like, to be a caregiver for a child or anyone in our family or anyone we love with my son has profound intellectual disabilities. And that was really special. Another person of note whom we've interviewed was Dr. Mary Frances Berry, who especially in the 1960s and 70s, was the civil rights icon, who worked with Dr. Martin Luther King and many others, knew Nelson Mandela, and spoke about her experiences with them. She is now a professor. She's 85, I believe, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, sharing her stories, her experiences, and talks a lot about history. And she worked for 5 U.S. presidents and is a real icon in the civil rights movement. And just others whom we have had the privilege of talking to, again, from people who are famous and from people who are not, but have stories to tell that bring meaning to the power of listening. One of the fathers or founders of the listening movement in the United States and now around the world was Ralph Nichols. And one of the things that he is most famous for saying and writing is the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and to be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. And that's why we do what we do. And the name Someone to Tell It To comes from an Australian author, Miles Franklin, who wrote something very similar, basically saying that the most fundamental needs of human beings is to be understood, and and to be heard and to be known. We all need that. We all need someone to tell it to, she wrote. And that is so important because when we keep stories hidden inside, when we keep feelings and experiences hidden, they become darker often. And they need to come out. And often they will come out in some very unhealthy and destructive, some often violent ways that hurt ourselves, that hurt other people. And we aim to help people to tell those stories in a safe, non-judgmental way so that the demons, the darkness, the fears, the loneliness can begin to melt away. In the United States, where we live, 1 in 2 adults experience loneliness on a regular basis. The statistics about loneliness in this country and around the world continue to become more alarming. And this didn't just begin with the pandemic. A lot of people think, well, now, and it's gotten worse since then, globally. And it certainly brought the problem into the light. But many experts now believe that the loneliness epidemic that we are experiencing in this country and around the world had its origins perhaps 70 or more years ago. Anybody here have any idea why that may have, what took place 70 years ago?
TV, television?
Radio. We'll start with radio.
Okay.
And then television, yes. Wonderful, wonderful inventions. Wonderful, absolutely. But even some of the most wonderful things often can have a dark side, a downside. And one was, instead of people sitting around the dinner table each evening and talking, they started listening to the radio and didn't talk as much. Then started watching TV every night or throughout the day, didn't talk as much. And now with the plethora of technological advances that we've had and ways to connect, which can be wonderful when they are not utilized properly, healthily, they can become destructive. And there's just so many people. We're all connected. We talk about the fact that we are more connected digitally, electronically, in this world than ever before. but at the same time, we are more emotionally and relationally disconnected than the world has ever seen because of that. And that is the problem that we are trying to break through and alleviate. Another story also takes place locally. A middle-aged woman lost her husband suddenly, and she was devastated, of course, by that. Her family and good friends, descended upon her and were very encouraging and helpful and reassuring and supported her, especially in the, in the days and weeks in the aftermath of her husband's sudden death. We were called in, and some of her family members knew the work that we do and called in to listen to her and support her. We went to her home. While we were listening to her talk about her husband's illness and then sudden passing and what that was like, her phone rang, telephone rang. She didn't want to answer it because she wanted to continue our conversation, so she was going to let the answering machine get it. And then a voice came on the answering machine, and it was her husband's. He was the voice recorded on the machine. And we all just kind of paused. We realized who it was. She stopped because it was his voice. We just listened. And then she said, after the voice was over and the person was able to leave a message, she said, "My family and my friends who've been here, whenever that happens, they beg me to get his voice off the recorder. They said, you're never going to be able to heal. You're never going to be able to move forward as long as you continue to hear his voice." She said, "But I don't want to, because it's the only thing I have left of him right now." We actually supported that because we realized that's what she needed in that moment and in that period to move on. She needed to keep hearing his voice as long as she needed to, until she could realize that it wouldn't be there anymore. And eventually, she got through that. But what we try to do is support and validate people in what they need to get through a difficult situation. If it's hearing the voice, that's important. I actually remember when 8 years ago my mother passed away, and when one of someone, I don't want to be, this is not meant to be critical, but that someone canceled her phone that had her voice on it. And I secretly was horrified because I wanted to keep that phone and wanted to keep it live for a little bit too, because I wanted to be able to hear her voice for a little while longer. And so I understood that this woman wanted to continue to hear her husband's voice, just like I wanted to keep hearing my mother's for a while. So it's important to be able to listen to people and know what they need in difficult times, and to support and validate them and let them know that it's okay, that whatever it takes to heal, whatever it takes to get through, whatever it takes is what is okay to happen. And that's one of the things that we do through someone to tell it to as well. Some of the issues with loneliness are these: that there is a greater risk of premature death. They realize that loneliness is something that actually eats away at us and begins to kill us. It's the equivalent. The Surgeon General of the United States has written and said that it is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day as far as what it does to your body. And cardiovascular disease incidences rise, dementia risks rise, stroke, depression, anxiety, all of these things, loneliness is a huge contributor to. And when we are lonely and feeling disconnected, have no one to tell it to, have no one to open up with, no one to be just fully vulnerable with and honest with, we begin to die. And it helps to bring about these things. The studies are showing that it is a real problem. And it causes people to abuse drugs more, alcohol more, abuse their bodies more, overeat, just do all kinds of things that are destructive to our physical health. So our mental and emotional health is just as important. And that's why we do what we do, to help people with their emotional and mental health as well as their relational health. Because when we do not have good relationships in our lives, someone close to whom we can really share with, we begin to die. And so we just want to share with some of the fact that there are physical risks to our loneliness, disconnection, isolation. And that is also why not someone to tell it to exists, to help people to be healthier in every single way. One more story that took place here, in Hershey, where we live and where we are. There was a man who came to us. Actually, he didn't come to us willingly. His wife reached out to us and said, "My husband needs to talk with you. Would you talk with him?" And we said, "Certainly, but is he willing?" Because we don't, a lot of people come to us and say, "So-and-so needs your help." And on occasion, we've gone to see someone to tell so-and-so, and they've gotten angry. "Who told you that? I didn't ask for this." And so we are very careful. We always ask now, do they agree to this first? Because no one wants to be forced. Hardly anybody likes to be forced to do anything. So this man reluctantly agreed that he would come to see us, but he wanted to set the terms of where he would meet, how long he would meet, at what time of day he would meet, and we agreed to those terms because we believe in meeting people where they are. And if that's going to help them and enable them to open up, then we will do it. Because that makes a huge, huge difference. So we met him actually in a church basement locally. And he told us a bit about his life story. What happened was, and again, he gave permission. We've written about this. He's given us permission to tell it. He was at a party on a Saturday night, and he had too much to drink. He fell down a flight of stairs and literally put his head through a wall. Had to be taken to the hospital where he spent the night. He wasn't badly hurt, except for his pride. And except for the fact that his wife was really angry with him. And because this wasn't the first time some of this stuff, happened. In fact, it was the last straw for her. And she said, if you don't get some help, if you don't talk with somebody, our marriage might be over. So he agreed. We met with him for 90 minutes. We try not to put too many time restrictions if somebody needs whatever they need. If we have the time, we will give it to them. It wasn't until, in the 90 minutes, maybe minute 70, that the real crux of the matter came out. Why he had a drinking problem, why he would go out and get drunk, why things happened like that, falling down the steps and ending up in the hospital, and why his marriage was really not going well. And he finally shared. what it was. But it took him 70 minutes of our conversation to feel like he could trust enough to share something he had never told anyone in his life. He was a 60-year-old man. He'd been holding it in since he was 8 years of age. He lived in this town of Hershey, Pennsylvania. He was walking home from school one day, and a group of boys, a little bit older, stopped him, and they abused him. Made fun of him, hit him, abused him so sexually as well. And he was so embarrassed, so horrified, was so much in pain, he never shared it. Never. Until that accident, that night, that he ended up when he ended up in the hospital, when he finally told his wife. And that's especially when she said, you need to talk with somebody else about this. And he did. And he got it off his chest. We didn't shame him. He was afraid that people would shame him, that he'd be blamed for it, that they would think something of him that he wasn't. And finally, after all those more than 50 years, he was able to get it off his chest. Tremendous. And we continued meeting with him for months, and actually a couple of years after that, to help him and support him, and to let him know that we weren't judging him. We knew that wasn't his fault. We knew that he didn't bring that on, and that he deserved to tell the story. And that's why he agreed to let us tell it, because he knows that other people have gone through these things too. And if his story could help redeem someone else's, that's what he wanted to do. And we were so proud of him for that. So these are the kinds of things that we do every day. Listen to these kinds of stories, help people process what they're going through, and let them know that they're not alone. One of the things that we've written in one of our latest books, called Listening 2 by 2, is this. My partner in this work, Tom Caden, and I wrote that listening is not a soft skill. Often it is. People will say, that's just, the number of times when we tell people what we do, they say, oh, so you just listen? As if it's easy, as if we all do it well. The fact is, most of us are terrible listeners in this world. Most of us listen to respond as opposed to listen to understand. Most of us listen then to judge and to tell people what to do, or tell them when they were wrong, or question, why did you do that? Why did you say that? There's nothing more that will more quickly get someone to stop talking and to stop sharing and to stop opening up, to stop trusting, than when you judge them and tell them that, and question, their motives, or why they do what they do, why they said what they said. It's not that you have to agree with them, what they've done or said or anything like that, but the moment you judge them and they know it, conversation's essentially over. They're not going to trust you anymore. They're not going to open up anymore. They're just going to continue to hide whatever it is that they really do need to talk about. So we want to keep the doors open to people to get stuff out so that they can begin to heal and begin again to have better relationships. So it's not a soft skill. It is the primary skill that all of us need in order to foster human connection and to understand one another better in an increasingly relationally and emotionally disconnected world. Our job, what we primarily want to do now, is to create the context for better human connection between us. We desperately need it in this world. we've just gone through a difficult election, process in this country. No matter where you stand, we are fractured. We are a fractured people, and we need to better understand one another, to understand our differences, because in understanding maybe the differences, we can also begin to see and understand more of what we have in common, more of what we share, more of the values that matter to us all. And the fact is, quite simply, any of us really, when it comes down to a want, is to be loved. We want people to love us, to care about us, and to believe that, and for us to believe that we are worthy people, that we matter. That's what we want. As human beings, we all share that. And if we can begin to find connection in that way, it makes such a huge difference in all of our lives and in all of our relationships, in the work that we do, and professionally, in the work and relationally, in our personal lives. One more story. We got an email one day after having spoken at a Kiwanis club in the city of Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania. And a gentleman who was not there reached out to us because a coworker was of his. And the coworker passed him our card and said, maybe you want to talk with these guys. And he wrote to us and laid out the litany of things that had happened. His father had just died of cancer. His mother-in-law had just recently dealt with cancer. He himself had colon cancer and was now healed from that. So it had been a difficult time with cancer throughout his family and him personally. There were any number, or he had found a coworker didn't show up to work one day, and unexpectedly, and he and another coworker, they kept calling and reaching out, and the guy didn't answer. They went to his home. They found him dead. And that was traumatic for him. To top it off, this was about this time of year, right after the first of the year. And he said that the biggest thing was that his wife on New Year's Day, her wish for the new year was to be out of their marriage. And he said, would you be willing to meet with me and listen? We agreed right away. We set up a time, Friday afternoon, in a coffee shop. And we continued to meet with him for months afterwards. For the first several times we met, and it was almost every Friday for those months, he barely spoke. He was so demoralized, so depressed, so sad, so in grief, so feeling unworthy and not even know how to talk. We sat there in a lot of silence for several weeks. But we sat there and gave him the space he needed to know he wasn't alone. As the weeks went on, he began to talk more, to tell us more about his life, about his family, about the problems in his marriage, and just everything. He was very open and very vulnerable with us. And things began to grow better. And then one day, he asked us to meet in a different coffee shop for some reason. And it was because he was feeling so good that he felt that he was starting a new chapter in his life, and he wanted to meet in a different place, to symbolize that newness, that new chapter. And in fact, he told us he was going to be going for a job interview, going to get a new job, start all over, and the job was going to be on the West Coast of the United States. And he promised us, I'm not running away. I'm not running away from my problems here and just going thinking that that's going to solve it. It's that there's a job there that I really would love to have. And so he went. But before he went, for those of you who are here, know Hershey well, the day that he was leaving, he wanted Tom, my partner, and me, who had listened to him for more than 6 months, to be the 2 last people he saw in Pennsylvania. So he invited us to brunch at the Hotel Hershey, paid for it all, to celebrate his new life, his new chapter, and what he was going to be doing. A spectacular time together. And then we walked out into the parking lot, hugged one another goodbye, and didn't know if we'd ever see him again. He got to the West Coast and started this job, and he started going to a church, and he sat in a seat that apparently belonged to someone else, if you understand what I mean. And this woman around his age came and sat down next to him and said, you're sitting in my seat. She's kind of kidding him, but he was, apparently. But she was serious, too. And guess what? They hit it off. And guess what? They decided to get married. And we got to meet the woman because she traveled to the East Coast. We got to visit her in New York City. And he, came back too on occasion. And so, we have kept in touch over the years. Every few months we get to talk. And when he texted us to say that the next day, whenever he was going to ask her to marry him, she was a widow, had 3 children, and her husband died young in a terrible accident. And she was from the West Coast, and he was thrilled. And then he said, if she says yes, and we had talked with her privately, and she was telling us that he better propose to me, or it's over. If he doesn't do it soon, I'm moving on. And so we did not tell him that, because that was private, but we certainly encouraged him to propose. And he did, but he texted us and said, if she says yes, I want the 2 of you to come out here and stand next to me to be my best men. Because you were with me at the worst, I want you to be with me at the best. So, there we are. His name's Michael, too, in the middle. This is my mission partner, Tom. And there we are, on his wedding day, in the matching suits he paid for us. I've got to say the most expensive suit I own. It's just tremendous. And what a day that was, and what a time that was to share with him, and to be honored in that way, to be invited to be his best man as he started another new chapter in his life, one that it is going extremely well now. And we are so proud of him and so happy for him. And there's been nothing better than to have this job, to be able to be with people and support them through the worst times of their lives, to help them reach the best times, we hope. Not everyone gets there quickly. For many, it's an everyday, ongoing challenge. But we stick with them as much as we possibly can and encourage them. And our teams of listeners, we always do it together. We always have to go out in teams with one another, so that no one's ever alone entering a situation that might be scary or are really difficult, that we always are in it with someone else. listening, supporting, encouraging in whatever way that we can. So, I have one more kind of story to talk about. When we started Someone to Tell It To, I had a book that was recommended to me called I'm Proud of You, My Friendship with Fred Rogers. It was written by a journalist from Texas named Tim Madigan. Tim was a journalist who was sent to interview Fred in Pittsburgh about 7 years before Fred died, to interview him about and do an article on violence and children, children's television and violence and how that affects children, on the TV. And Tim and Fred hit it off in so many ways. At the time, Tim was in a difficult spot in his life. That's what his book is about. His marriage was falling apart. His relationship with his father was never good, and it was just fraught and difficult. And his younger brother Steve was dying of cancer. It was a dark, dark time. Fred Rogers listened to him, did not judge him, didn't tell him what to do, all he did was validate him, constantly encourage him, reassure him he wasn't alone, be vulnerable with him about his own struggles, and supported him through all of it. They have many letters, correspondence, back and forth, emails, phone calls, voicemail recordings that they shared in the 7 years before Fred died in 2003. And that's why Tim wrote that book, to share about this wonderful relationship. Last year, so back up a bit before I get to last year. I shared that book with Tom. It was foundational for us starting Someone to Tell It To. And the way Fred Rogers listened and supported him through the darkest time in his life. I'm happy to say that Tim was able to repair his relationship with his dad. His marriage, which was falling apart and he was ready to leave, survives today, and it's strong and healthy, good. Unfortunately, his brother did die, but his relationship with Fred helped him through that death. And Fred also supported and was encouraging to Tim's family of 7 children that Tim and his brother were part of. And it was just instrumental, that relationship, in them healing and getting through those difficult times. Last year, Fred co-wrote a play called I'm Proud of You, based on that story, that book. He invited Tom and me to Fort Worth, Texas, where he lives, where the play was premiered, to one of the performances. It was beautiful and spectacular, make people cry, make people laugh. It moved and inspired people, especially to know that they're not alone in life's difficult moments. And to just bear witness to the as saintly as a person as you could possibly find in Mr. Rogers, who was very much exactly in real life like he was on TV. We had the idea that play didn't need to end in Fort Worth. And so we talked with Tim and the director of the play afterwards and said, what if we could try to bring that play to Harrisburg? How could we do that? We did. It's coming in March and in April. It's going to premiere at the Open Stage Theater. And Tim Madigan's going to come for some of the performances, going to talk and speak. And we are, as Someone to Tell It To, co-producing it with Open Stage. We've never done anything like this before, but we are co-producing this play because it was instrumental to our founding, and the message of the play is instrumental to the work that we do and the mission that we have of supporting people and helping them create better relationships and get through the most difficult times in their lives. The scariest part of this, and the most wonderful at the same time, is I auditioned for and received a role in the play as Mr. Fred Rogers.
Oh, wow.
I do not look like him at all, but it's not an imitation of him. It's not a, I'm not trying to imitate him. The play's not about that. It's sharing his spirit. It's about being his spirit. And rehearsals start in a couple weeks. I'm feverishly trying to learn my lines.
Good luck.
And it's not easy, and it's scary, but I'm so excited and proud. So I just wanted to share that, because this is something here locally that we are hoping will be sold out, and that it will help put the work that we do even further on the map, especially here locally, because we believe that this work is so needed and so important. So just wanted to share that, and to let you know where some of our inspiration also comes from Fred Rogers, who was just a magnificent human being. And I'm be the honor of my life to try to be like him on this stage. So I'm going to end with that and see if you have any questions that you would like to ask or anything you'd like to share.
You had made presentations of places around the world, as I understand. What do you find different and similar to people from other cultures when you listen to them?
There's not much that's different. We are all human beings, no matter where we are from, or where we live, or what language we speak, the feelings are the same. Human beings, we have the same feelings. To tell another quick story, there's a gentleman who reached out, a Muslim man who reached out to us from Saudi Arabia, had 3 of his children die. His father had died, and that's why he reached out to us to talk with us. And we just talked with him 2 months ago on the phone, and it is not easy arranging phone calls to Saudi Arabia with the time difference and all of that. But you know what? A father's grief or a son's grief at the loss of his father, and the loss, and then this younger father's loss of his 3 children, it is the same grief, no matter where you are, no matter what country you're in, what your culture is, what religion, if you have one, is or not. You don't have one. The grief is the same in so many ways. So the easiest way to say is that it's just the feelings are so much the same. People just need to be heard. They need to be allowed to express their sadness and their grief in this case. Whatever it is, people just need to be heard and to know that somebody else cares enough to listen to what they're feeling and experiencing. That's all. No matter what, it's the same in everywhere we've spoken or anyone we've interacted with.
It's good for other people to know that somebody else understands where they are
Absolutely.
coming from. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a little bit like, how do you get hooked up with people that want to talk to you? Now, you had mentioned that sometimes people refer
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Or
We have a website, and people can reach out there. Because of the internet, people can search, where can somebody listen to me? And we will come up. That's why we write books. That's why we do a podcast. That's why we blog. That's why we speak, because the more we do, that's how we get business, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's because we put it out there, that this is what we do and why we do it and how we do it. And we've never lacked for people reaching out to us, including from around the world. We've had a gentleman, a young man, reach out to us from Uganda. And we talked with him for years, and we just heard from him fairly recently. It was his birthday, and it's just incredible. And because of the internet, people can find us, and so that's generally how it happens. We do not have to look for business.
So once somebody comes to you or somebody says, this person, I'd like you to reach out to them. You and your partner, two people, but how do you connect the listeners with the person that's...
We ask them, we have somebody who now handles that for our organization. When somebody reaches out, and most people reach out via email, and we have an actual email called We Listen at someonetotellit.org, and people reach out. They can reach out we have other emails too, but sometimes they'll reach through that. But the We Listen is the most important. And then this person gets back with them, and what we always say, we always write to them is, we are proud of you for reaching out, because we know it's hard for people to do it. And then ask how they would like to meet, because we don't often know where they're from. Are they local? We can meet in person. Or are they in Australia? And so we ask, how would you like to meet? And we can, any technological means available, in addition to meeting in person if they're local, whatever. And they'll tell us. And we also ask, do they have a preference as far as gender is concerned? And try to ask too, is there maybe what the situation is that they want to talk about, because that helps to match the volunteers. We have volunteers and some paid people to do this. It helps to match the listeners with them. I can tell you that if somebody writes about something really pretty difficult, guess who gets to do them? They give it to my partner and I, for the most part, because we're the ones who started this, and we're the ones with the most experience. And so maybe you guys better take this one. And we're glad to do that, because we don't want to put anyone else in a situation that they are uncomfortable with and listening to. So, and I listen with some of our other, my partner and I have done most of the listening together, but we also join with other of our listeners and work with them too, in various situations, depending on what they are and who's available and all those kinds of things. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, well, and also if somebody wants to be a listener, you have a training
We do.
session.
We do.
You do online.
It's online. We have a training online, as well as we do some in person also, and we definitely just anybody can go through the training online or when we do it in person. And we travel now. Like I said, we were down in North Carolina back in October. We were doing training on listening. Then we have, but we're very selective on who actually gets to listen for us. We have a second training. They have to go through that first one, but then we have a second one that's even more in depth and talks more about the things that you need to do. And then we have every month on a Tuesday night, the next one's coming up this coming Tuesday, we have online for all of our listeners, they are welcome to join, and we do training there too for them, talk about specific subjects. And I'm going to be leading the one this coming in 2 days for our listeners, so that they get it's kind of continuing education for them, so that they're always up to date, and they can ask their questions on things they encounter, things they're not sure about, anything like that. So it's always ongoing, because we want to make sure that everyone adheres to the values and the ways of doing this. And on occasion, very, very rarely have we ever had any problems with that, with a listener not not hearing to, not doing it correctly.
Well, it would seem if you have two people in on the listening session, it's sort of
Yes,
a balance.
absolutely. Because if whoever I'm listening with it doesn't know what to say or doesn't know how to react, hopefully I do. And vice versa. Sometimes I don't know how to respond to something as quickly. I gotta process that a little bit. And hopefully my listening partner, Tom, who most of the people listening I've done with, he's able to step in, and so you help each other in that way. And no one's alone, and no one has to be scared when they hear something really tough. And that way you can process it too. You can share with one another because you're not breaking confidence, and you can kind of work that out. Sometimes because if you're doing it alone and you hear something really, really painful or difficult, and you don't know what to do with it, that's pretty tough. So we do that as well to protect our listeners and help us to be better and feel safe. We have 1 more minute, so is there one final question? And if not,
I mean, this is very altruistic. So how do you get volunteers and sustain yourself is what I'm looking for.
the hardest part of this is that, to be honest, the sustaining ourselves financially. We're a nonprofit, and we stick pretty closely to the nonprofit part of that, in the sense that we don't have a lot of profit. Well, we're just all committed. We're all committed to doing this and believe in it. My partner and I are both trained pastors. I mean, I was a pastor for 10 years here at First United Methodist Church on Chocolate Avenue in Hershey. And and some of our other listeners and pastors too. So we're all trained in these kinds of things.